Make it swift, Cowboy. I won't cry out, murmured the injured Apache maiden pinned beneath the ravine's weight. Wes Harding wasn't the sort of fellow who courted danger, yet misfortune had a way of tracking him down regardless. It always struck during those hushed instants when his vigilance wavered, like that dawn as he traversed the gorge, anticipating only a hushed path and a span of peaceful isolation. But then came a noise so subtle he nearly dismissed it as a breeze, until it repeated. A ragged inhale choked by suffering, and he knew at once that another soul was in torment. Urge drew him toward the tight fissure amid two sheer rock faces, his spurs grinding against scattered pebbles as he peered into the gloom for the origin. There she lay, partly concealed beside a toppled boulder, an Apache lass whose resilience gleamed even in how her gaze fixed on him with caution, not terror. Her raven tresses adhered to her cheeks in grimy whisks, her flesh etched with gashes and crusted crimson. Still she bore a poise that caused Wes to temper his advance, palms raised and bare. As she lifted a quivering limb to brace herself, she uttered in a steady, measured tone, "Make it swift, Cowboy. I won't cry out." Those words caught him off guard, not for their audacity, but for the unyielding certainty woven through them. She'd endured solitude long enough to embrace torment without a quiver. Dropping to one knee nearby, he swiftly gauged her plight. Her right limb was wedged under a slab of stone that had likely tumbled from the precipice overhead, locking her in a snare no one could break alone. She'd scraped at the earth in a bid for freedom, and from the welts on her limbs it was evident she'd been ensnared for hours, perhaps days. When he inquired her name, she replied plainly, "Nail," then shifted her focus to the canyon's edge, as if foes might crest it at any breath. West recognized that vigilance. He'd carried it often across untamed frontiers. He spotted the snapped arrow stem by her side, the traces of strife preceding the collapse, the ripped hide band of her garb hinting at a pursuit or haul before her entrapment. Softly, as though a louder word might beckon fresh foes, she recounted how a band of outlaws had stormed a wandering Apache encampment, seizing holy relics and sowing ruin. She'd resisted, wounding their chief in the fray, but that merely painted her a quarry. She dashed into the ravine to shake them, only for the landslide to claim her in fate's bitter jest. Wes's chin set firm. He'd witnessed ample savagery to spot when harm had been unjustly dealt, and her every mark cried of wrong. The stone clamping her limb was hefty, yet not unyielding. He eyed its slant, the stress spots probing its embedment. It demanded power, fulcrum, and her aid. When he shared this, she dipped her head, denying any flicker of dread, though her lungs caught each time his fingers met the crag, shoving his frame under its rough brink. He heaved with full sinew, his heel slipping in the soil as he pried the mass aloft. It yielded but a fraction, and Nail grasped the instant, yanking her limb clear with a keen inhale she swiftly muffled. The chunk slammed down anew, stirring a haze of grit. She slumped against the sheer face, attempting to arise amid the ache. Wes extended a hand on reflex to support her, but she waved it aside. Not from vanity, but the wariness of one schooled to hide frailty. Ere he could speak, her eyes flicked skyward, tracing a silhouette gliding the crest. "They've arrived," she breathed, her inflection confirming it as truth, not hunch. Wes's fingers sought his sidearm, his form pivoting to a guard's poise, interposing himself twixt her and peril. The gorge turned suffocating then. Flanks too near, outlets too bare. Nael urged she could press on, though her thigh trembled below, and with her grasp draped across his neck, they commenced, creeping along a slim trail burrowing further into the depths. Trailing them, loose stones pattered from on high, harbingers of descent with ill will. Wes grasped they must flee post-haste, yet every stride brought her a flinch, compelling him to bear more of her burden. For all the hurt, she stayed keen, ear cocked for treads, gaze on the brink, murmuring swift counsel on the gorge's curves and likely lurks. Her valor shone plain, maimed and hounded alike. She bore herself as one loath to yield.
Wes had crossed paths with fighters aplenty, but her quiet fortitude, her defiance of shattering, it pierced him more than foreseen. As they gained a slim notch in the rock face for scant cover, Nael eased to the dust, clasping her thigh as if to banish the throb by sheer will. "You ought to abandon me," she grated through gritted jaws. Not a beseech, but sound counsel. "They seek me, not you." Wes hunkered before her, his look grave yet serene, and stated flat that he wasn't one to forsake the afflicted. Be it luck or fate, their trails had merged, and he'd shepherd her past this. Nael regarded him long, probing his features for guile or falter, and what she gleaned eased her guard, just a subtle dip in her frame. Overhead, a jeering trill resounded through the chasm, chased by a call of her name in mocking lilt, betokening the rogues drew nigh. Wes thumbed his pistol, tallying rounds by feel, a right from shadowed days, and drew a measured lungful as he braced for the clash he deemed unavoidable. Nael clasped his wrist, not to halt, but to ground herself, murmuring that her hunter would cease only at her end, and for their endurance they'd best stir soon. Wes inclined his head, resolve etching his visage, and side by side they readied for the morrow's trial in the gorge's lethal hush. The slim nook in the stone granted but a fleeting respite ere the menace bearing down swelled fiercer, and Wes knew each tick in concealment gifted the foes another to hem them. Aiding Nael upright, he steered her onward o'er the rutted floor, her frame against his not from wish but must. But she held sharp, surveying the dancing glooms with fighter's sense, forged ere their meeting. Her mangled limb dragged their pace to a crawl of torment, but her mettle held fast. She advanced with a steadfastness that stirred Wes beyond measure, and as they rounded a crook where the ravine broadened a touch, he saw their sole shot lay in gaining the incline yonder to the flats. But that rise lay bare, a born kill zone for perch above.
When he voiced it, Nael demurred not. She merely evened her breaths and said they had no option. Astern, the outlaw's jeers wafted nearer, vaunting, swearing, hissing her name with the spite of souls who deemed brutality play. A lead slug caromed from the face, pelting shards earthward. Wes moved like lightning, hauling Nael after a jutting mass and loosing retorts with keen mark. His shots dispersed them for a beat. He sensed they probed their stance, gauging the quarry's woe. Nael, pain notwithstanding, fixed on the ground, noting the slim eve where a rogue edged in. Wes shifted his bead per her hush and let fly, catching the glad clang of iron on crag aloft. But the scant triumph scarce lightened their lot. The assailants outnumbered, and Wes's stores dwindled. As he renewed his charge, Nael admitted in terse, hushed gusts that the pack dogged her not mere for grudge, but for lore of her kin's stowed holy trove. They reckoned agony would loose her tongue, and her steadfast silence had but stoked their heads' ire. Wes hearkened mute, grasping now 'twas no mere chase, but a quest aflame with avarice, scorn, and smarting ego. He vowed they'd wrest back the pilfered, his tone laced with a fervor long absent. Safeguarding her rang true, as though the chasm had summoned him with intent. With shots stilled for now, they forged ahead, cresting the bared rise at length. Nael hauled a deep, anguished draw and signaled ascent. He braced her ascent, but midway a holler split air. One brigand had marked them. Slugs chewed the loam at their toes, and Wes cloaked Nael with his bulk as they clawed higher. She faltered, her hurt knee folding, and he snared her midriff, dragging her up with frenzy's might. At the upper shelf, they huddled after a rank of splintered stones. Nael gripped his limb fierce, her huffs torn, yet her stare burned keen. She pressed they couldn't flee endless, that the pack would wax brash once her pulse proved. She bade Wes scheme wise,
turn the gorge form against the hounds. Her wit, amid hurt, cut clear, and Wes heeded her as any battle-hardened peer. She gestured to a heap of slabs o'er the trail the rogues would tread, proposing a wee tumble might grant vital breaths, or maim a few. Wes marveled her poise in straits as she leant on stone. He scaled the teetering brink she named. The toil racked, and oft he near slipped, but he gained the wobbly pile and wielded his pistol's haft to nudge key bits. The chasm quaked as rubble roared down the slim way, routing the foes amid yowls below. Niall seized the uproar to shift to a sturdier spur, snaring a cast carbine from an earlier loss. When Wes rejoined, she proffered it, deeming his need greater. Ere protest, fresh steps neared. From the far flank, token the scum-cleaved ranks. Wes arrayed to bar them, loosing measured blasts, each curbing the surge. Niall, enfeebled though, hailed alerts, flagging sly glooms and aiding his foresight of shifts. Their accord, tempered in blaze, flowed oddly seamless. Folk of sundered realms warring as one from peril's weld. As heaven shaded to twilight's hush, Wes noted the outlaws fraying, their barbs hasty, their strides rash with time's creep. He and Niall inched to the gorge's mouth till the broad meadows bloomed fore. Breaking the chasm's grip, Niall reeled, but stood unbowed. Her sight locked on the horizon where her folk had roved days past. She breathed that reaching her straggling band held hope, not lone for her breath, but for reclaiming the holies and mending her line's pride. Wes nodded, firming his hold around her, aware the trek loomed vast and fraught, yet none he'd sooner tread. Their flight from the depths quelled no menace, but kindled a potent tie betwixt them. Faith, grit, a common aim that lashed their dooms firmer than oath. And as they quit the ravine's lethal clasp, both fathomed the real fray scarce dawned.